of the modern civil rights era. Because before Memphis and the mountaintop, before the bridge in Selma and the March on Washington, before Birmingham and the beatings, the fire hoses, and the loss of those 4 little girls, before there was King the Icon and his magnificent dream, there was King the young preacher, and a people who found themselves suffering under the yoke of oppression. And on the eve of the bus boycotts in Montgomery, at a time when many were still doubtful about the possibilities of change, a time when there were those in the black community who not only mistrusted each other, but mistrusted themselves, King inspired with words not of anger, but of an urgency, a fierce urgency that still speaks to us today. Unity, he said, is the great need of the hour. Unity is the great need of the hour. Unity is how we shall overcome. What Dr. King understood is that if just one person chose to walk instead of ride the bus, those walls of oppression would not be moved. But maybe if a few more decided to walk, those foundations might start to shake. If just a few women were willing to do what Rosa Parks had been willing to do, maybe the cracks in those walls would start to show. If teenagers took rides from north to south, maybe a few bricks would come loose. Maybe if white folks marched because they had come to understand that their freedom was wrapped up in the freedom of others, that they too had a stake in the impending battle, the walls would begin to sway. And if enough Americans were awakened to injustice, if they joined together, north and south, rich and poor, Jew and Gentile, then perhaps that wall would come tumbling down, and justice would flow like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. It puts up walls between us. We are told that those who differ from us on a few things differ from us on all things. That our problems are the fault of those who don't think like us or look like us or come from where we do. The welfare queen, she's taking our money. The immigrant, he's taking our jobs. The believer condemns the non-believer as immoral. And the non-believer chides the believer for being intolerant. And for most of this country's history, we in the African American community have been at the receiving end of man's inhumanity to man. And all of us understand intimately the insidious role that race still sometimes plays on the job and in the schools, in our healthcare system and in our criminal justice system. And yet, if we are honest with ourselves, we must admit that none of our hands are entirely clean. If we're honest with ourselves, we'll acknowledge that our own community has not always been true to King's vision of a beloved community. If we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit that there have been times when we've scorned our gay brothers and sisters instead of embracing them. The scourge of anti-Semitism has at times revealed itself in our community. For too long, some of us have seen immigrants only as competitors for jobs instead of companions in the fight for opportunity. Every day, our politics fuels and exploits this kind of division across all races and regions, across gender and party. It is played out on television. It is sensationalized by the media. Last week, it crept into the campaign for president with charges and counter-charges that serve to obscure the issues instead of illuminating the critical choices we face as a nation None of our hands are clean. So let us say that on this day of all days, each of us carries with us the task of changing our hearts and minds. The divisions, the stereotypes, the scapegoating, the ease with which we blame the plight of ourselves on others, all of that distracts us from the common challenges that we face: war and poverty, inequality and injustice. We can no longer afford to build ourselves up by tearing each other down. We can no longer afford to traffic in lies or fear or hate. There's the poison that we must purge from our politics, the wall that we must tear down before the hour grows too late. Because if Dr. King could love his jailer, if he could call on the faithful who once sat where you do to forgive those who had set dogs and fire hoses upon them, then surely we can look past what divides us in our time and bind up our wounds and erase the sympathy deficit that exists in our hearts.